Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is row. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that we use this verb. The first way you're likely to hear row used is to mean to propel a boat with oars. Now, some of the words here might be new for you. You've seen the word propel as we've studied various verbs connected with sports, athletics, and the Olympics. So, as a quick review, propel means move someone forward. So, the word oars might also be a bit new for you. I've included a picture down in the bottom right hand of your screen to help illustrate that. So, the long pardon this is a crude description, but wooden sticks that you see inside that boat, those are the oars, and that's what's being used to move the boat or propel it. A second way you might hear row used is to mean to travel by propelling a boat with oars or to convey or move a passenger by propelling a boat with oars. So the second definition is still very much connected to our first one, but here there's more of just a purpose. So trying to get from point A to point B or trying to move someone from one spot to another. A third way you might hear row used is to mean to engage in the sport of rowing. And hopefully, with this definition, you can see why I've picked this verb. And as we've spent about 2.5 weeks now looking at verbs that you might hear or see if you're following the Olympics. So, there's very much a sport of rowing, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress through the video. You should know that row is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, all you need to do is add ing to form rowing. Now, some of my students will look at this particular verb and see a consonant, vowel, and then a consonant, right? R and W are consonants. And they might be thinking, hey, you've told me I need to double the ending consonant when this pattern occurs. And normally you're absolutely correct. But here the letters O and W are making the vowel sound. So while W is a consonant letter, here it's part of the vowel sound. So that's why we're not doubling the consonant here. We're just adding ing to form rowing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by adding ed. Our base verb ends with a vowel sound, row, o, o. So our past tense ending is going to make a D sound, road, road. Now, I just have one additional phrasal verb for you, and that is to row back. It is not connected to boats or water at all. This means to retreat from a position. It's not something you hear a great deal in the United States. I think it's more common in British English. But I have seen this phrase used recently in a few different articles, and I thought it'd be good to have an example of it. Let's take a look at our example sentence. The health minister rode back from his earlier statement saying the pandemic was over. We know we've had a number of government officials, elected officials, say things like, okay, the pandemic is over. But now we're seeing the Delta variant of COVID-19 spread all over the United States and through many countries throughout the world. So while some people might have thought, okay, we don't need masks, we don't need social distancing anymore, that's not looking to be the case, right? So they're kind of stepping back, changing their position. So now this minister in this particular sentence is going, I was wrong, the pandemic is not over. And I believe in this particular article I was reading, this person was saying we need to go back to wearing masks when we're in closed spaces. Now, after learning a little bit about that phrasal verb, we're going to shift gears and practice making questions. In just a moment, we'll practice making simple future questions using will uh, with our verb of the day, row. But before we do that, let's do just a quick review. Normally in our videos, we talk a lot about yes or no questions, but I want to spend a little time looking at how we make WH questions, or what I like to call more information. So these are questions we cannot just say yes or no to. We have to provide some more information to the person who's asking. When we are making questions for the simple future, we have a general structure that we can follow for most of them. Our pattern is going to be to use a question word, right? You can see here, right? We're going to use a question word, then we're going to use the modal will, then we're going to use our subject. And notice this pattern is the same no matter what our subject is. So it's always will and then the subject. Then we might have a base verb. We might have some more information to kind of help build out that question, but you could just end the question with the base verb. So I've made this chart here so that you can practice creating your own questions. I'm going to do one for us, but then you're welcome to pause this video and try and make a few of your own, right? So an example of a question we could make might be, let's start with the question word where, then I'm going to use will, and now I need to pick a subject. Let's use they. Where will they study, right? So now I'm asking someone likely to make some prediction about what they think is going to happen in the future. Now that we've got that basic structure down, let's use it to make some sample questions with our verb of the day, row. First, let's talk about making a question about a location or a place. If you want to ask a question about location or place, you should use the question word where, W-H-E-R-E. I have the example question here, where will they row later, right? Maybe they're rowing to the other side of a lake. Maybe it's to an island. Maybe they'll just row back and out in the water a bit and then back to their original starting point, right? That's what we're hoping to learn by asking this question. Now, if you want to ask a question about a particular day of the week or a date, so like Tuesday, July 27th. That's what I mean by date. Or maybe you want to ask about time. Is it 9 a.m., 4 p.m., right? When is something happening? You can hear that's the question word I want to use. When, W-H-E-N. So an example of that. When will she row in the Olympics? Maybe there's a particular athlete I want to see compete, right? So I might ask that question to make sure I'm watching at the right time. Another way we ask questions is to describe the manner in which something is done. For that, we should use the question word how. Here's an example of that. How will we row that far? So maybe someone has shared plans for us and they're pointing somewhere that looks maybe too far for my level of skill when it comes to rowing. Another word we use quite frequently is why, and this is to learn the reason that something is being done, or in this case, in the future, will be done. An example of this: why will you row across the ocean? Each year, I think there are different people who try and challenge themselves to maybe row across the Atlantic or row across the Pacific. And if you met one of those people, you might want to know, what is your motivation? Why are you doing this? Okay. The last type of question that follows our pattern is when we want to learn about a thing. So we call this a determiner, and we use the word what with it. So what will he row? Right? So maybe I'm asking for you to describe or identify the type of boat that he will be in. Okay, so notice where, when, how, why, what, they all followed the pattern we talked about earlier. We have two different types of questions, though, that kind of break our pattern. Another one is a determiner, and that's the question word which, W-H-I-C-H. With this determiner, we need a noun or a noun phrase to follow which. So here, we'll look at the example, and this might make it a little easier to understand. Which boat will they row? So I need to sort of give options, right, with that question word. So here I have which boat, and then my pattern resumes. I use will, I use my subject, I use my base verb. The last type of question that you probably have asked or heard is when we want to learn about the subject, the person who is responsible for doing an action, right? We're going to use the question word who, W-H-O, but that word is also serving as the subject in our sentence, okay? So our pattern here does look different. Who will row the boat? So notice you're seeing will and the base verb right next to each other. They're not separated by a subject, and that's because the question word is there to act as our subject. Now let's spend just a couple more minutes looking at words that are related to our verb row. And the first word we're going to look at is just the noun form of this word. So same spelling, same pronunciation. It can have a few different meanings. One way to use the noun row is to mean a number of people or things that are generally in a straight line. Let's look at an example of this in a sentence. The park is behind that row of houses. Right? So generally the idea is the houses are pretty much in a straight line. One might be a little more in front of another, but for the most part, they're on a straight line. That's the first usage for row. The second way to use the noun row is to refer to a line of seats. So this could be in a movie theater, an arena, or some other venue or place where many people might gather to watch something. An example of this in a sentence might be, our seats are in row M. You might see rows either categorized by letter or by number. A third way you might hear the noun row used is to mean a horizontal line of entries in a table. So if you work in Excel or Google Sheets, you'll hear this noun used quite a lot. We'll talk about highlighting a particular row or putting a formula in certain rows. So an example of this meaning in a sentence could be, can you check the information in this row, right? So again, referring to horizontal, going across. The next word we'll look at is the noun rower. Hopefully that suffix of er tells you it is a person who rows a boat, especially when they are members of a racing team. So I've included another picture on the bottom right of your screen. This is sort of an overhead shot of about 5 rowers. We can't see all 5 people, but you can see kind of how they're positioned. They're holding their oars. They alternate side to side, and that's in order to keep the boat from just going in one wrong direction, so to try and keep it straight. An example of this noun in a sentence could be, there are 36 U.S. rowers competing in the Olympics. The last word I'm going to leave you with today is a compound word. It's a noun, a rowboat. And so you can probably figure out what this means, right? We know the verb row. I hope you know what a boat is. And this is just referring to generally small boats that are able to move because of oars. An example of this in a sentence might be, they keep a rowboat at their cabin to use in the nearby lake. So generally, especially if you're not a well-trained rower, you're going to see people using rowboats in small bodies of water, right? Generally not a good idea to take such a small boat into the ocean. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.